Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the second session of the Bison Transport Sport Leadership Series, Fostering an Environment for Safe Sport. My name is Anastasia Bucsis, and I will be your host tonight and throughout the rest of the series. Once upon a time, I was a long track speed skater. I was very privileged to go to a few Olympic Games in my 24-year career, and tonight is very dear to my heart. We're going to have a very vulnerable conversation, solutions-based. It is a safe space rooted in respect. And I am just so thrilled to be joined by three fierce individuals to talk about safe sport. It was a really historic day for Canada in sport today. Of course, Canada taking on Belgium, losing 1-0. It was the first time in 36 years, I'm sure everyone's heard this, that there was a men's Canadian team in a World Cup. But truly, we can't celebrate the good parts of sport if we are not having conversations like this and looking for solutions. Because if people do not feel safe or included or respected in sport, we've got a long way to go. So, especially obviously with the World Cup, that brings up other conversations and other concerns. And I always just, if I'm being vulnerable, have to celebrate the athlete voice and athletes pushing narratives forward and looking at the intersection between sport and politics. And, we really just have to have a vulnerable conversation. And that's what we're doing here tonight to make us all better. So thank you for joining us. This series brings together inspirational leaders from all areas of sport to tell their personal and professional stories, offer valuable advice and guidance, and share practical tips that participants can use on and off the field of play. We all know sport goes so far, so much farther than just the field of play. Sport Manitoba would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we work, we live, we play. Obviously, are the traditional lands and waterways of the Anishinaabe, Cree, the OG Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties made here and are grateful to work, live, and play on this land. Sport Manitoba values and welcomes the opinions of all participants and strives to offer a safe space where respect for speakers and guests is maintained. Welcome once again to all of our attendees, and in particular, our friends at Bison Transport. We're excited to have you all with us tonight. Sport Manitoba, in partnership with Bison Transport, aspire to increase female engagement in sport by providing an informative, inclusive, and inspirational experience throughout this series. Just a few quick housekeeping things before we get started. If you are having issues with your stream, happened to me before, click on the click here to refresh stream button under the video player to view our alternate stream. And if you are having technical issues, click on the help button on the lower right corner of the webcast page, and your help request will be emailed back to the email address that you provided. So whatever email you registered to be here, just ensure that you're checking back, because that's where the help will go. Lastly, throughout tonight's sessions, we encourage you to ask questions. I want to make this as interactive and conversational as possible. Please use the question box on the right-hand side of the webcast, and engage on social media, whether that be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform. Please tag Sport Manitoba and use the hashtag LeadHERship. LeadHERship. To kick us off, we're going to hear from Amanda Dory, Sport Development Officer at Sport Manitoba, who will speak on the current and upcoming safe sport initiatives in this province.
Thanks, Anastasia, and hi, everyone. Sport Manitoba's work in the area of safe sport is called the Pathway to Safer Sport. Essentially, it's a comprehensive framework of tools, templates, resources designed to empower our provincial sport organizations, our PSOs, and everyone who participates in sport in Manitoba to create a safer sport system. Things like the Safe Sport Line, Mandatory Respect in Sport program for coaches, the Responsible Coaching Movement, and True Sport Manitoba lives here. We also have a new Learning Center platform, new governance policy requirements for our PSOs, and a partnership with Sport Law, which is an organization that delivers leadership training, risk mitigation, and conflict resolution. Sport Law has led the way for Sport Manitoba staff, board, and even some of our Canada Games athletes to complete a culture assessment of our organization and its Team Manitoba program. so we can be accountable to our commitments to safe sport and continue to find ways to improve and innovate. We also are embarking on a provincial-wide media campaign to promote the Safe Sport line, including giving signage to sport and recreation facilities across Manitoba so that this resource is in the forefront of the spaces where we play. Other upcoming initiatives include a survey to learn what the safe sport needs are in Northern and Indigenous communities, and a Safe Sport Champion School partnership with the Manitoba High School Athletic Association. The Pathway to Safer Sport helps us achieve our vision of creating an inclusive and welcoming sport environment. It also delivers on our promise as the planning agency for amateur sport in Manitoba to support our PSOs in building a thriving sport community. We can't do it alone without the help of everyone as a collective at all levels: clubs, schools, athletes, coaches, officials, spectators, parents, volunteers. It's all of us working together. The Pathway to Safer Sport is a journey and a way forward. It's definitely not an end. It evolves as we learn and build upon the existing framework so that we can help all Manitobans experience the joy of sport. You can find all things safe sport on our website at sportmanitoba.ca/safesport. Ooh, sorry about that. Before Anastasia introduces our guests, we wanted to let you know that we've made a change in our panel tonight. Dean Gios from the Rainbow Resource Center will not be joining us, and we will have someone in his place who will introduce in just a few moments. We received some feedback and questions about having his perspective at this session, and we want to share that we have listened and understand the importance of having women and girls share their personal and professional stories on this panel. We welcome and value your opinions, and most importantly, we want to make this a safe and respectful networking space for everyone.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We are so excited to get this conversation going. So let's just quickly meet our all-star panel.
Hi, my name is Danielle Parsons, and I'm the Manager of Continuous Improvement at Bison Transport. Allison Forsyth began her competitive ski career at 5 years old and quickly progressed up the ranks to qualify for the national team at 17. She is an 8-time Canadian champion. She has 5 World Cup podiums, a bronze medal at the World Championships, and competed for Canada in the 2002 and 2006 Olympic Games. She retired in 2008 due to injury and took her experience in elite sport to start her career in brand, marketing, and corporate communications. Currently, Allison is a partner at ITP Sport, a safe sport agency that provides services ranging from prevention programming to independent complaint management. Living through her own sexual abuse in the sports system, Allison became an advocate for change and used her voice, skills, and passion to lead critical changes in the Canadian sport system. Allison aims to make sport a safe, positive place for athletes at all levels, driven by her experience and her commitment for a better future in sport for her 3 young children. Sarah Schwendemann has been a community sport organizer for over 10 years in Winnipeg, using a safe sport for social justice lens. Her goal is to increase access and inclusion for historically excluded athletes, top quality safe sport programming. She's coached the URCOM girls soccer team for over 10 years, sits on the Winnipeg Youth Soccer Association Board of Directors, and is the Manitoba Soccer Association Women and Girls in Soccer Committee. She currently facilitates sessions for Canadian women in sport and consults with the Winnipeg Newcomer Sport Academy, Anti-Racism in Sport campaign, and some soccer clubs. Her formal high competition sport experience also lies in soccer, where she faced barriers as a young athlete in need of mental health supports. Welcome, everyone.
I also just want to quickly introduce, of course, our third speaker, Kelsey Lambert, who was a late addition to the series tonight. Hey, Kelsey. Kelsey is a queer community member who's a passionate advocate about creating safe spaces for 2S LGBTQ folks to participate in sports and recreation in Winnipeg. They are connected to Rainbow Resource Center and Out There Winnipeg, and they have experience as both a queer inclusion educator and sports organizer. So welcome, Kelsey. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Allison. Thank you so much for joining. Again, I want to make this as interactive and conversational as possible, with really a lens to being solutions-based. We, of course, have heard safe sport in the media a lot, and it is very difficult and very heavy, but so important. So just quickly, Allison, I'd love to start with you. Can you please just share a little bit about your personal experience in safe sport and how that fuels your passion to help?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anastasia. I'm very, very excited to be here. I think your province is incredible. I'm in Ontario, but I have all great things to think and say about Sport Manitoba and the work being done in that province for safe sports. So I work in this space. I am a proud mom of hockey players. I am a survivor of sexual abuse within the Canadian sport environment. And so I have a very unique expertise and perspective. Obviously, just giving you a bit of a trigger warning here, I will talk for about the next 3 minutes about sexual abuse, but please know that I don't go into any obvious graphic details. And if you want to know more about what happened in my case, of course, the Google machine will help you out. So feel free to search it up if you want to learn more. But really what I want to share is my experience in sport was amazing, minus one very horrific period of time. So first and foremost, I still very much believe in sport. If I didn't believe sport was a great place for kids, I wouldn't have all three of mine in high performance sport. In my personal circumstance, I was a victim of egregious sexual abuse at the hands of our national team coach back in the 1990s. So I'll take us way back pre-millennium. At that time, it ended up being about 5 out of 10 of the young women on the national team that were being abused by the same predator, which I know we could all think, well, how could that happen? But the stages of grooming allow that to happen. So he mentally isolated us from each other. It was extremely traumatic, the abuse itself. But to be frank, Anastasia and team, it was more traumatic with the fact that it was covered up by our sports organization at the time when I went to blow the whistle. In that, it took 17 years for the perpetrator of our abuse to be caught. And who actually caught him was a victim, which is an incredible woman named Geneviève Simard. She did what a lot of athletes did, and she decided to become a coach after a very successful career. And he showed up coaching again 17 years later. So it was the work of her where she went right to the RCMP and she said, you have a very bad person on the mountain coaching young girls, and he was arrested within 12 hours. So our experience was traumatic and rare. I want to stress that it was rare. Yes, we need to watch out, of course, for signs of grooming and predatorial behaviors in our coaches and in any person of authority. And I'm happy to go into that because I love educating on that. But safe sport is about many forms of maltreatment and abuse. So what we see in the sexual abuse with the work we do is actually quite rare. And the media, of course, with all respect, do like to grab onto it. Because it gets a lot of eyeballs, but I don't love that narrative because I want people to still feel safe in sport, but they do need to understand the warning signs, which I'm happy to go into. The last thing I'll share is that we went to a 2.5-year criminal trial. This was very traumatic for us. There was 12 of us. I actually had to testify the day after I had my little baby Scarlett. So any parents in the crowd can imagine not only the hormonal levels I was going through, but that challenge that happened. And I did it for 2 reasons. One is for obvious to see punishment for the perpetrator of our abuse. He received 12 years in prison. We all know that that is not enough, but that is our criminal justice system. Larry Nassar trial was happening at the same time. He received 150 years. But the other reason, to be completely frank, is we wanted to make change happen in the sports system. And unfortunately, at that time, that was 2017. And when the trial ended, nothing was happening. So a group of us victims came forward. We had our publicity ban lifted, which basically meant we could use our real names. And we started to advocate for change in the Canadian sports system. So that's where my safe sport passion, purpose, and now profession, those are 3 Ps for y'all. That's where it really took off. And I've been working and advocating in this space for victims. And I work and advocate for organizations that are committed to change. And I work and advocate for coaches who are also committed to shifting behaviors to fit within the new standards of safe sports. So I am here to speak and answer questions on any aspect of this, and know that I'm good. I want to share that. I'm very open about my challenges that I have suffered, chronic PTSD. I have clinical depression, anxiety, substance abuse challenges. Why I share these openly, because I believe strongly that we need to destigmatize mental health challenges and illness. I have an exceptional therapist. So just know I really heal through helping. And so I am more than happy to share what has happened and to work with anyone who wants to work in this space, because that is my number one way to heal. So thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. And you truly, I'm not blowing smoke. You truly are a hero. You know, I think a lot of folks know the good work that you're doing. So thank you again for joining. I would love to just invite Kelsey and Sarah into kind of this follow-up question, because I think it's a good place to start. You mentioned warning signs. There's a lot of folks with a lot of power that are watching this panel. You know, this is probably a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour conversation in and of itself, but where's a good place to kind of talk about warning signs and identify warning signs? Because as you said, there are so many layers to safe sport. Allison, sorry.
Oh,
follow up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So if we're speaking about warning signs around sexual predator behavior, I don't want to say it is simple, but here's what it starts with. You need to be very mindful as a parent, as an administrator. You need to watch out for people of authority that are picking favorites and creating personal bonds with their athletes. What I will share in this is extremely common. And what we do deal with is respondents in cases who are, I think in a good way, contacted about potential grooming. And they say, wait a second, I'm just friends with the athlete. All right. So one of the biggest things is that you need to watch out for favoritism, a person of authority coming to you as a parent or an administrator saying, I'm the one that's going to take the athletes to the top. Just give me the kids or give me the athletes. And oftentimes, Anastasia, the challenge is these are the best coaches. And that's just the reality. They put themselves in a position of ego, narcissism, and we fuel that in our Canadian sports system. So what I say when I speak about this is what we need to watch out for, and I'll use non-inclusive language here because it is non-inclusive, but we need to watch out for the guy. We hire the guy into our organization because he usually is the best. And how we define the best is he gets the most medals, the most championships, and has the best track record for success. Once this person enters our organizations, we fail to manage them. If you look at all the major cases that have come out around sexual abuse, you'll see one common trait, which is lack of oversight. So we don't manage this person. We don't check in on this person. We all, including parents, believe it or not, and of course I'm generalizing, will turn a blind eye to behavior or grooming signs because we go, oh, but I want my child to make the team, or this is the best coach. And I use the coach as the example of the person of authority. So you want to watch out for favoritism and personal bond. There's only 4 steps to grooming, everyone. 4. And it shocked me the first time I heard these because I was 30 years old when I first heard these, far past my abuse. Favoritism, personal bond, mental or physical isolation, and complicity. Complicity meaning they will find a way to make it the victim's fault. In sport, we are incredibly vulnerable to this because we want to win and we will blame ourselves. And if you have a toxic coach, that person will jockey the athletes off each other. They will all start to feel they want to be his, her, or their favorite. And it creates not only toxicity within the team, but becomes a breeding ground for potential abuse. So it is the guy or the person that you least expect as well. This is going to be a bit graphic, but bear with me. You're looking for the Ted Bundy in your organization. So Ted Bundy was a serial killer, I'm sure we know, in the 1970s. He was also a white male, heterosexual, Anglo-Saxon, and he was a lawyer, and he was very good looking and very charismatic. So I want you to respect and understand that you're not looking for who you may think in the media you would be looking for. You're looking for the person that has you manipulated, and they are the funniest and the most charming, and they're probably going to be the last person that you would suspect. So it's challenging because I don't want to obviously typecast certain people or stereotype, but I see so much of this that I know clearly it is usually the last person you think. And then the last piece, which is very difficult, and I'll share this on behalf of coaches that might be around when an abusive individual comes through the organization, is there's a fine line between complicity and victimization. So you can imagine if you have an abusive coach within your organization, there's other coaches around, there's other parents, heck, you're around. And once we realize something really bad is happening, we have to recognize that we may also have been groomed because they are very, very manipulative and very powerful at what they do. So all that to be said, just please be mindful that you need to support that boundary between the athlete and the person of authority. Absolutely not should any of your coaches be following athletes on social media and vice versa. It is a breeding ground for personal bond and inappropriate contact with athletes. And we need to set these boundaries really strongly, because boundary transgressions into personal bond is where it all starts.
Boundaries. Sarah and Kelsey, again, conversation. I'm welcoming you into this conversation about boundaries, about warning signs. Sarah, how do we ensure programming is safe for everyone?
Yeah, so safety means different things to different people. And I think when we talk about, who we have as an image in our head of having certain positions or being certain stereotypes, we need to decode that. We need to reflect on that because, I think we only know what we know. We only have our own lens. And to make sure that sport is safe for everybody, we need to have really diverse voices having these conversations from the beginning. So for example, I coach girls, and for me, even as a female, I would have never known that certain menstrual products are unsafe for certain girls that come from certain cultural backgrounds. So I could go into more details about that, but I just remember being so shocked to learn that. And for some families, that's the norm. They understand that tampons are completely inappropriate for certain cultural groups. And so just making sure that we kind of rid ourselves of that paternalistic view that we know what's best and that we know everything, and that we have to bring diverse voices into these conversations from the beginning to kind of co-create these safe spaces, because what safety means for one person. And I think sexual assault is a very specific example that is not safe for anybody cross-culturally. But in terms of different aspects of safety or lack of safety, like racism, like discrimination, like sexism, like religious discrimination, those type of things are a bit more nuanced and have, different communities have to be brought into those conversations from the beginning, because someone who doesn't represent those communities isn't going to understand what safety means from that lens.
Absolutely. Kelsey, that's a great jumping off point. What can you say, or from your perspective, how can programmers gain a greater awareness as to how to create an inclusive space?
Yeah, so it's a pretty big question, I guess, from a 2S LGBTQ plus perspective, which is really what I want to bring into this conversation. I would firstly say that there are organizations out there that are trying to help create those spaces already, and we need to make those connections. So places like Rainbow Resource Center or Out There Winnipeg are organizations within Winnipeg that can run sport-specific workshops to, because I can only say so much, in 5-10 minutes on this call, but they can work with you, go through, do like consultations of your policies, practice with you how to use like inclusive language and things like that. So I would say reaching out and getting those connections made, and you can do partnerships and things like that. But briefly, just to give some ideas, learning and staying informed is super important. And then really what you do with that information is kind of the real deal. So some practical things to think about could be being a role model with things like language, like avoid using gendered language, use people's chosen names and pronouns, share your pronouns, advocate for change in your organization, like looking at policies and procedures, and sussing out if there's homophobia and transphobia within them, and keep them up to date, because it's also always changing. You can also advocate for larger changes within sport culture, like challenging the gender binary norms, and promoting inclusivity in like recruitment, advertising, physical spaces, online as well, like social media and websites. Those can all be updated to be more inclusive. I think ultimately it's sort of this balance of advocating for larger changes on like systems levels, but also modeling your own appropriate behavior while you work within the unchanged or changing system, and really being transparent so that folks can make decisions for themselves and advocate for themselves as well. Like Sarah said, you can only know so much based on your own experience. And so we need people to be able to feel safe to advocate for themselves and share what someone else might not know. Yeah, like I said, connect with the queer organizations as well, and other community members that are wanting to help sports become more inclusive. Like myself, I'm not connected specifically to an organization right now, but I'm happy to be here and share my input as a queer person. I would just lastly say, it's important for queer people to feel like they can advocate for themselves, but also don't expect it. They're there to participate and be athletes just like everyone else. And creating an inclusive space means having those policies looked at, and the way that you're behaving should already be inclusive, like proactively. Like it shouldn't be something they have to come in and change, and nor should we expect that sort of labor from them. They should just come as they are and be able to participate just as anyone else can.
100%.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I add one piece onto this, because I love advocating about this, is also don't expect folks to do work for free. So I think we're seeing a lot of positive shifts, and and it's so legit, because one, don't ask people to do this off the side of their desk. Commit real resources to it, build it into your budgets, connect with organizations. We have a phenomenal anti-racism in sport campaign in Winnipeg even, and they have so many resources available. I love that, because I think right now we expect it to be like this subcommittee off the side of someone's desk to make inclusive, safe sport systems. And then we reach out to all these community organizations putting their heart and soul into this day in and day out, and ask them to do a bunch of labor for free. And we wouldn't ask that of other professionals. So just being mindful of making sure that you properly compensate folks like Rainbow Resource Center or Out There Winnipeg for their time.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind that 100%. Just quickly, Kelsey, what, from your perspective, is the biggest challenge, though, in providing a safe sport environment for 2S LGBTQ folks?
I think that from a queer perspective, the biggest challenge is really that sports have just been gendered for so long in so many ways. The washrooms we use, the change rooms we use, the outfits we wear, how we divide the teams, assumptions we make about the abilities of different genders in sports, different gendered representations on TV and in professional environments, stereotyping of, girls play this and boys play this, and ultimately the complete exclusion of any other gender diversity. The gendered binary is just so deeply entwined within sport that it's so hard to undo or change. And it's actually pretty overwhelming to even think about. And I think it's really comes down to this connection between, or it's where homophobia and transphobia meet misogyny, or the assumptions we make about women and girls versus men and boys points us in different directions and completely erases gender and sexuality, fluidity, and diversity. And it's actually a huge problem, not just in sport, but in the way it perpetuates harms outside of sport by doing it in sport. So you said, things happen on the field, and it also it's out in real life too. And I think that happens with, it reproduces and perpetuates the gender binary. So for example, when we divide children into sports by male and female categories at a really young age, what are we telling them? We're perpetuating the gender binary by saying, hey, what's in your pants dictates who you play with and what you play and what you wear, and so on. And that's why I think that's such a big issue, and is I would say the biggest challenge. And I think it will require a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of creativity to change, because it's just so deeply seated.
Anastasia, may I offer something that I think will help sort of share with the folks about how the safe sport and EDI overlaps?
100%.
Because I specialize in the space of safe sport. And up until honestly, everyone, about 6 months ago, organizations and everyone were keeping this conversation separate, even to the point where I was told, come in and educate on safe sport, but we have someone else coming in to educate on EDI. So I want to just share with you what the progression of harm looks like. And so if I were, educating you with a presentation right now, I just want you to picture a pyramid. And I want you to think about, just because I think it's very relevant, I want you to think about the top of the pyramid being murder, the second level being physical and sexual assault, the third level being major, infractions of safe sport, the fourth level being microaggressions, and the fifth level at the bottom being attitudes and beliefs. So I want you to think about hockey. Hockey is a very relevant topic right now, and I want you to think about what happened in hockey. And that would be the second from the top. So what we do in safe sport is we focus on that. We focus on what has happened, and it keeps happening. So we try to get rid of the people, or we try to get rid of that problem. The reality is where this progression of harm starts is transphobia, belief in superiority, fear of others, ableism, sexism, right? So when we take a young child and we say, you're special, and we're going to have you surrounded by people that look and act just like you, and we take you out of the system, and you go through this pathway, and we're all thinking about high performance athletes right now, and you're not going to see anyone that looks different than you. The rules are not going to apply to you. They easily go up to that pyramid and they end up at that place. So when I work with organizations on not only that we deal with a lot of discriminatory complaints, largely around language that people are using that they haven't learned how to shift, things that they're doing almost unintentionally. I'm not trying to let them get away with that, but there's a lot of language being used that people don't recognize as non-inclusive, and people are filing complaints against that. But more importantly, we need to recognize that that is what the culture is. So if you have a non-inclusive, inaccessible sport, you naturally will be creating an environment for that next level and that next level to occur. So that's the best way I think I can educate us to why these two go hand in hand from the very beginning. Athletes need to feel safe and included, and we need to educate our children on what that looks like so that they don't feel superior and that the rules don't apply to them.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of my questions was around re-traumatization as well, because I think anyone, as someone who also has lived with extreme PTSD since the age of 11, trauma breeds trauma. So now you have a set of athletes who are extremely vulnerable from what they experience within society to re-traumatization within our sports system. And then they get to discipline systems. And if you want to talk about re-traumatization, asking a young Black Muslim athlete who experienced atrocities on a soccer field to go and sit down in front of a group of adults and be so brave to tell her story, just to have all of those adults ignore her words, turn around and say, oh, well, he could have never meant it like that. He's a really good guy. He could never be a racist, is so insanely re-traumatizing. And the fact that we're not looking at these systems more closely and how they impact the athletes, young to, senior athletes as well. This occurs at any age. It's just kind of another layer of how we have that loop. And I appreciated the comments about re-perpetuating the same kind of loops of everything from attitudes to, sexual assault. And then that loop keeps repeating itself through different systems within our sport organizations. Unfortunately, I know we've come a long way, but I think this very honest conversation is going to be a great opportunity to learn how we can move forward still as well, because there's a lot of work to do still.
So broaching the conversation of mental health, and I can't believe it's already 34 minutes in. I feel like I could talk to you folks for 3 hours. But signs about how athletes may need some additional support regarding mental health. Let's try and tackle that. Sarah, do you mind offering your first thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, so this is rooted in firsthand experience from my perspective, but also now as a coach of, I think almost 11 years of coaching inner city athletes who face so many additional barriers to sport, and to the point where our teams have had human rights violations human rights violations launched against organizations that we were engaged with. But, I think extreme behavior in either way. So every person, every human has this intersection of that makes us who we are. So when you think of, really kind of reclusive, drawn back, withdrawn behavior, anything outside of that athlete's norm, all the way to acting out, talking back, again, really extreme behavior either way is a signal as a coach. And also, if they tell you, we innately form bonds with our athletes. And I think understanding your responsibility to report right away. If you ever have that gut feeling when an athlete tells you something, you might have had, that opportunity to have that nice informal chat and they kind of throw this information out, obviously understanding your responsibility to report right away. And then working with the other parts of that athlete system. So again, we're all very unique individuals. We're all going to have different systems of support. Maybe it's an educator, a teacher at their school. Maybe it's a family member. Understanding that if you have the athlete's permission to share their story, making sure that you bring together all the different parts of their support network with their permission, for sure. But I'm sure the other amazing panelists have something to add.
Yeah, please, again, conversation. Allison, I see you unmuted. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'll take this maybe to a more tactical level of what I work with coaches. A lot of what we find in our work is a disconnect between mental performance and mental health. And when we have a coach, this coach may feel that it's their place to be a mental health expert with their athletes, because if we flash back to, I always use Friday Night Lights as the example, maybe some people are too young for this, but it's, it was a show that was, the coach is the everything. The coach brings the kids home. The coach is dealing with their mental health challenges, their family challenges. So one of the biggest things I work on is having coaches and anyone in authority respect that mental health is different than mental performance. And that if you have an athlete who is showing acute signs of mental health challenges, you need to refer that out, because we have dealt with instances where coaches or any person of authority has unintentionally stepped over that boundary into a space where they're not experts, because 25 years ago, we looked at coaches as everything. So now we need to decouple mental health and we need to decouple athletes' personal lives. Then the last thing I'll share is I always offer to people to think about their level of understanding, their level of acceptance around physical health versus mental health. And if we know now in sport, and this is the beauty of this, is they need to be hand in hand. And we are in a place where we are finally destigmatizing mental health challenges and mental illnesses. But it's a lot easier for us, I believe, for me anyway, to be confident when an athlete sprains their ankle than to be confident in what a mental health challenge looks like, because it's a new space for us to step into. So without stepping into these fine panelists' expertise, I'll just share that we have an opportunity to ask ourselves, do we feel as comfortable and understand mental health and where to go and what to do about it if we see it in our athletes, and where to get those resources? And they need to start to level up against each other, physical safety and psychological safety.
Yeah, I love that thought of understanding that none of us know everything. And that's kind of the essence of none of us have the lens of everybody. We only have our lens. We only have our expertise, and calling in professionals, calling in professional educators around welcoming newcomers into sport, Indigenous sport, LGBTQIA+ sport. All these professionals and experts have this wonderful opportunity to add supports and educate your sports organization as well. So don't think you need to do everything, and being proactive. Hold mental health sessions with your team, with your sport organizations. I think that's a great opportunity for PSOs to say, hey, we're going to throw a session around this specific mental health topic. Let's bring all of our coaches in, or whatever the target group would be for that audience. So being proactive, one, it creates a safe space for folks to go, holy smokes, I can talk about this with my team, and they have connections to professionals. I think I also have a great therapist, and advocating for families to gain as many supports as possible. But unfortunately, the reality is that therapy in and of itself is so inaccessible. It is so expensive. You have like a very specific schedule you have to meet. The wait lists for community programs are tremendously long. So I think pulling in, sessions where you can, and being proactive is a really great step as well. Sorry, Kelsey.
No, I love being proactive. And Kelsey, do you want to add? Because I was going to say, how do we empower people so they don't, experience the bystander effect? Because a lot of folks go, oh, I don't know, I'm not professional in that one category, I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah. To add on to what Sarah was saying first, I think knowing resources for different groups is really important, and not just knowing them, but having that warm handoff. So, if you, you can expect that you're going to have queer and trans folks on your team. If you don't, or you don't know, then you probably want to question why you don't know, because there's 10% of the population is 2S LGBTQ+. So you might want to start questioning that. Are you creating a safe environment? But you can learn about resources. You can go to community organizations like Rainbow Resource Center and be like, hey, I run a sports organization, or I'm a coach, and I just want to know more about what happens here and how folks can access these resources, so that you can let your teammates know, or the kids you're coaching know about what resources are available to them, and you can let them know what to expect when they get there, kind of thing. Which helps reduce their anxiety and stuff about accessing those services. But Anastasia, to empower bystanders, I think this happens a lot when people feel like they can't step in if they hear something homophobic, for example, because they don't know enough about homophobia, or they're not queer and they don't know what the right words are to say. Then we say nothing. And everyone's heard that silence is violence, and it is. And so there's other ways to do it, even if you don't know. So obviously, if you can stay informed about different identities, that's great, but we're not always going to be caught up on everything. And I think we have to accept that within ourselves, and realize that it's still okay to step in. So the best advice I think that I would give is to get used to saying, I don't agree, or I don't agree with that. So if you hear something and you don't necessarily have some profound thing to say or educate in that moment, if you just shut it down with, I don't agree, it actually goes a long way, because it lets folks in that space know that conversation or whatever's happening there is inappropriate and not tolerated within the space. It's also where policy and procedure is really important to look at, because if you have policies to fall back on, you can say, hey, this sort of behavior or the comments that you're making don't align with our policies or won't be tolerated in this space. This is a respectful sport environment. Here's the policy. These are the repercussions if you continue this behavior. If you need support to learn more about it, here's some resources, or I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about it. Things like that. And then you can, set up a meeting to be more prepared, or to get someone else who can help in the conversation with things that you don't necessarily know. And I think especially, I'm just trying to speak to a more queer, because that's what I can bring here, is a queer perspective. I think if you're heterosexual and or cisgender, you hold a lot of privilege in situations where homophobia and transphobia is happening, obviously. And that can actually be used as a tool, because it's probably safer for you to say something than for someone who the harm's being done to say something, because they're already at risk in that moment. And we often think of privilege as this terrible, scary thing that makes us feel a lot of shame. But on the flip side, you can actually use it to do something really good and useful that helps work toward better power imbalances in these situations. So I think if we can look at privilege that way, then and find it as a duty to learn more about what you don't know, and not be so afraid, and understand that someone else is probably much more afraid than you are, because they're actually much more at risk, then you can step in and stand up more often, even if it's just, I don't agree, and shutting down things that are inappropriate.
That's fantastic. I don't agree. I mean, I agree with you, but that's a great saying to have in your back pocket. Sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you.
No problem. And it's kind of my shtick right now, because I've been doing this for so long now, and I've gone through so many different layers of organizations. We need discipline systems that can uphold bystander testimonials. Because again, as it happens right now, and this is such a big opportunity for positive change within sport organizations, is that someone will report something, someone does stand up and they're brave and they videotape. Everyone videotapes everything nowadays. There's so much evidence to back stuff up. And then it gets to the sport organization, it gets to the league, it gets to the PSO, and nothing really can happen because we don't have the systems on the back end to support it. The systems get overwhelmed. We kind of default back to that societal norm, to our societal conditionings of oh, well, we can't really ever call them that. It'll affect their day job, or it'll affect their, their lives. They're a good person, I swear. So again, shifting away from that default narrative, shifting towards the belief of victims, and making sure that their safety is put above the safety of, I want to use certain words, but I don't know if it's the space for them. But the comfort of folks who traditionally hold power is not more important than the safety of communities who also want to engage in sport, and making sure that we balance that more and then have the systems to back them up.
So, and we got to get to audience questions. So just quickly, I mean, I love dissecting privilege and having that conversation. So Sarah, I'll start with you, and then Allison, Kelsey, please add. How can we help sport leaders decode their own privilege that will help increase safety for all athletes?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about. But it's also a really huge question that we could probably spend like a half-day workshop on. So I think, the Coles notes would be to understand your social location. And like Kelsey was saying, don't be scared of it. Right now, when we talk about white people, we talk about white privilege and white fragility. People kind of clam up and they freeze and they're not sure what to do with it. But those are gifts. Like knowing that terminology, understanding what comes with it is such a gift, and provides the opportunity for you to decode some of your privilege. And it's never one thing. There are terribly wealthy, privileged people within all communities, and there are terribly poor families who face abuse as children in all communities as well. So privilege doesn't mean one thing, but we also understand that historically systems have favored certain demographics. So understanding where you're, like, if you picture a grid and you picture everything that makes us who we are, putting us at a different place on that grid, and really reflecting on it, because it's not easy to unlearn generations of like social conditioning. There's like physiological aspects in our brain to this stuff. So it's not easy work, but don't think that you can personally skip the work. We all have unlearning to do. We all have shifting to do, and making sure that we provide this space. Like, to be honest, we all have things personally that we need to even work through before we can reflect really well on our social location. Like, I know Winnipeg has a Seeds of Reconciliation training that is dedicated to going through this learning so that you can provide the space within yourself to even decode your own privilege. And I would say honoring cultural differences. Like, I think right now we kind of say, this is how things are. There's so many different ways of doing things, but everyone needs to come here. So making sure that we are just a bit more respectful and saying, how do we actually equitably bridge these systems? Not how do we build a bridge over to our system? Because like Kelsey said, everything's binary. Everything's built off very certain structures. So we can't expect folks that don't fit into those boxes to fit into them. We just can't do that. We have to really unlearn and unbuild things before we can rebuild them. And just consciously co-creating systems again. So making sure that once we realize what our lens is and what our social position is, having folks that sit in all different parts of that social location grid and consciously co-creating systems together. I really think that's the only path forward. But I know we're almost out of time, so sorry.
I'll just quickly add, and first I want to share, I love doing these events. I learned so much from all of you. So thank you. I'm just very grateful to bring this forward to other people. But in the work that I do, which is more, I don't want to say more, but field of play work, I want everyone to understand that this is a lot. Sport is shifting dramatically, very quickly, as the world is. So the first thing is have grace and kindness as we learn, and patience. The second thing I'll share is, we can't get stuck in defensiveness when we don't know something. So the only way through this is to have the courage to show the vulnerability and say, I don't know, myself included. I have EDI partners who know they are now my language police, because I will walk into a room and what naturally comes out of my mouth based on my privilege and how I was raised is, hey guys, all right? So I'm still working on folks, but I share that with audience and I say, I am working and I am learning. What you want to watch out for is if you ever feel you are or someone else is in a defensive mode of saying things like, well, he is just an old school coach. Red flag. You cannot defend. You also can't say, well, Allison, that is just swimming or that is just hockey. We have to learn and we have to evolve. And when I deal with coaches or people of authority around this, if they get defensive, I say simply, listen, I'm not someone here to try to spend an hour shifting what you believe. That is your choice. I am someone who will now tell you what is expected of you in your profession and how you will not get in trouble. Because what I deal with, and I'll be frank, is I do a lot with, folks that just get, they get affronted with even the acronym of 2S LGBTQ+. They don't know what it is. And so instead of just learning, slowing down, asking the critical questions, why is it in that order? Why does it matter? They will go 2SLG, those people. Okay. So that is discriminatory, but they don't know that. So I'm just sharing that when I hear people say in safe sport is full of bad guys that we need to get out, that is absolutely inaccurate. The sport world is full of people that need to evolve, shift, educate, unlearn, and accept. And we're all up to that challenge. So just have grace, patience, and kindness, and please step into your own vulnerability because there's people to support you in your learning.
Beautifully said. Kelsey, would you like to add or?
Wow, you both answered that so well. I would agree with everything you've already said. And again, I would just say, like, don't put that labor on others. Do your own learning. As like a white person, I'm going to go learn with my white people and talk about what white fragility is. And also think about like, as Sarah said, like your own social location, and don't just learn about, harms to other communities and discrimination for other communities. We have to actually be like introspective and be like, there's lots of like white fragility workshops and books and so many resources out there now. Like we're so lucky to have the internet and social media and places that we can do learning and unlearning without causing more harm. And I think we need to just be really mindful of that.
We'll be right back with questions from the audience, but we're just going to take a quick break and see our messaging from our title sponsor, Bison Transport.
It started when I was a child. I was always amazed by the trucks. And you did the little arm thing and they'd honk at you, and I was just amazed. Thinking, I want to do that. I love the freedom of the highway. And it's not just a man's job anymore. Anyone can do it.
I was in a classroom with 12 men. I was the only woman in that classroom. I was actually told by a couple of instructors that a woman belongs in a truck, but not behind the driver's wheel. I got out of the truck, went to another school, and I actually found a school where they didn't care whether you're a man or a woman. And I got my license. I didn't give up.
Girls can do anything they put their mind to. I would say just do something you love. If driving is what you love, it is a very rewarding career. You really can't change people's minds. They have to change it on their own. You can say, look, I've been doing it for so long. I enjoy it. There's so many women out there. But if they don't have an open mind, you're not going to change theirs.
Women can do whatever they want and put their mindset just like anybody else, like driving a semi is intimidating, but doesn't mean you can't do it. So just gotta put your mind to it, that's all, and be confident.
If society is telling girls to be something different, I would say go against society. Do what you want to do what makes you happy.
Being a woman, you could do anything. There's no boundaries, not anymore. There was back way in the day, before my time. But no, you could do anything.
The only person that's going to stop you from doing it is yourself. So it doesn't matter what society says. If you want to do it, then you do it.
Thank you to Bison Transport for making this all possible. This has been such an amazing conversation. I want to go to our first audience question, and I'm going to challenge everyone simply because we could honestly talk about this for, as I think Sarah said, like days and days. I'm going to challenge you to make it really, really tangible. So what are some of the best practices that PSOs can engage in and adopt right now today? Allison, let's start with you.
Ooh, okay. So first and foremost, know that you are responsible for your own organization. So you're responsible for your own people. You're responsible for your own safety, your own inclusivity. What we find is, people will look up, down, or sideways for someone else to blame or to help. So you're responsible for your own people. I think first and foremost, you need to have safe sport protocols, policies, training, independent complaint management. That's a very simple thing to put in place. I mean, I'm making it sound simple, but it is absolutely necessary. Second, if you want your folks to not be getting in trouble under the safe sport landscape, you need to be focused on and including EDI training, education, and awareness. The last thing I'll add is this all starts with your culture. So I challenge all of you to look at your culture and ask yourself, do we have values? Are they on our website? Do we even know what those mean? And do we actually have committed actions that we expect of our people to live into to uphold those values? Because when you have a positive, strong, action-based culture, you very much minimize many of the issues that I have to unfortunately deal with within the safe sport environment. So if you want to minimize having to ever call us, which I really want you to have to never do, please focus on education, training, and your culture.
If I could just add on, those are the exact key pieces that I was going to touch on as well.
Okay.
One quote that really sticks with me is that policy and procedure gets eaten for lunch by your culture. So I think right now we have a lot of performative actions that are coming out. Like, you have great templates. You can go online, find a policy template, throw it on your website and say, look, we have a zero tolerance discrimination policy. And then your culture organizationally eats that for lunch, dinner and breakfast and snacks. Like, if you don't have the systems to back it up and you don't have the culture to support those policies and procedures, and on the flip side, if you have a great culture, but you don't have the policies and procedures to back them up, it can also kind of bite you in the butt. So making sure that you really take a holistic view of your organization. Do you have the policies and procedures in place? Are you educating your leaders and your staff and your administrators and your referees? Like, I think referees have such an important part on the field and on the pitch, ice, whatever sport you play, in that sense of safe sport. So making sure that your whole ecosystem is educated, and with the amount of resources available and organizations in Manitoba, there's really no excuse anymore, which I love, but making sure that it's not performative, that you're not just checking off a bunch of boxes, that you're breathing it in to the DNA of your organization, in how you spend your money, in what you allow people to say at your board meetings, how you back people up when they speak up against things, and build it in from the beginning. If you need to completely abolish one of your systems because it is just not working, it doesn't give people a safe place to report, or it doesn't actually support folks through the reporting system, get rid of it. Don't be scared to say this isn't working. We need to reach out for help. Amanda was speaking to some of the supports that Sport Manitoba has as well. Shoot off that email and just say, XYZ is happening. How can we pull together the supports available in Manitoba to switch it? And again, don't ask anyone to do this off the side of their desk. Make it a priority within your organization. Pair it with DEI. Again, the anti-racism in sport campaign is bred out of an amazing research campaign in Winnipeg as well. It has first-hand research from Winnipeg. Sorry, it's getting late. And just educate. Like, figure out what communities your sport is working with, which should be all communities, and how to educate your organization on best practices. And again, not thinking, how do we make people act like they can to fit into our organization, and go the opposite way. How can our organization shift to make sure nobody has to change to show up to play our sport?
Two brilliant answers. Yeah, Kelsey, would you like to add anything?
I'll just add in a little bit. You all did great. I would just say, listen and put into leadership roles the people who are different from you and different from the people who wrote what you work off of originally. If your space is safe for the most marginalized folks, then it will be safe for all.
Absolutely. I do want to keep us on time, and I realize that we're right at that 1 hour mark. we just have one other question from the audience, and we've touched upon it for themes throughout this entire hour, but again, really solutions-based, tangible answers, please. How do we inspire sport leaders to actionably demonstrate safe sport beyond just words, beyond listening and learning? And we know that those are so integral to creating a better system. But yeah, how do we inspire sport leaders to really actionably demonstrate what needs to happen? Sarah, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, I'm just going to make one quick point. It's don't be scared to hold people accountable. Don't default to our societal norms. We need fearless sport leaders who hold people accountable to their actions from all of the stages that Allison was speaking to, all those different stages. Folks are going to give you signals at each of those stages. Hold them accountable as soon as you see it, because it just gets worse and worse and worse. I think we are, again, shifting so quickly and so rapidly, but in a good direction. Everybody's going to make mistakes, and we are an incredible sport community in Manitoba and Ontario. Thank you for joining us to support us, but, you know, lean on each other, learn from each other, and just be fearless leaders, because we can be, for sure.
I'll just be quick as well. So celebrate safe sport. Don't hide it. I will say, honestly, our national sporting organizations generalizing, they hid the safe sport practices they did over the last 3 years. Okay. Celebrate it. You need to encourage people to come forward and report. You need to this is not a website or embedding a policy. You need to enroll, educate, and then enforce. And all of this through forthright celebration of what you're committed to standing for. You need to be willing to have complaints come in, because that is the first step in preventing and minimizing the impact. So do not get scared. This is a good thing. So celebrate the step forward that you're taking in safe sport.
Kelsey, you get the final word.
Ooh, the pressure. Yeah, I would just say, like, we can listen and learn all the time, as we should, but ultimately it's about what you do with it. And so we actually have to act. So if we listen and learn about, you know, a policy that's not inclusive, someone tells us that, then we actually have to change it. We can't just be like, oh, you know, someone else will do it. Or, you know, that accountability piece, I think, really comes through. And I think that we also have to recognize that things don't change overnight, and it takes a long time. These are like longstanding systems and a longstanding culture, and the shift will take time. So in that interim, try to reduce harms as much as possible and stand up when things happen. Come to these talks, you know, educate yourself, connect with other folks who are making these sort of changes in the community, and yeah, do what you can to change the immediate and pressure on the system, so that, you know, that we don't have to have these conversations anymore. You know, that's the ultimate goal, I think.
Kelsey, Allison, Sarah, thank you to everyone for joining tonight. I could listen to you three speak for many a day, and I just appreciate your time and your vulnerability. Thank you again to Bison Transport Sport Leadership Series. Just such an amazing conversation. We hope you enjoyed tonight's session and took some valuable information from, obviously, the three individuals we see here. Be vulnerable, ask questions, hold people accountable. You know, that pesky bystander effect that I think we all know, it perpetuates sport, it perpetuates every area of society, but we've got to get rid of it. And I just, again, thank you so much for your vulnerability to the three of you. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you again to everyone for participating, for the audience questions. Special thank you to our title sponsor, Bison Transport. This would not be possible without Bison Transport. So big thank you there. Tonight's session will be available on demand on Sport Manitoba's YouTube channel or sportmanitoba.ca/LeadHERship. Again, sounds like leadership, but there's an HER in there. And we really hope that you join us again on January 17th for the third session of the Bison Transport Sport Leadership Series. Details will be coming soon, so check your email. And please don't forget, we've got a Zoom networking session right now after we sign off here. We're going to take a short break, stretch, grab a drink or a snack. The Zoom link can be found in your confirmation email. That goes to our 3 panelists as well. The Zoom link has been emailed to you, or in the description box, actually, in this live stream. So please, everyone, join us for a quick networking session. And once again, thank you so much for joining this very, very important conversation, and really hope to see everyone back in January.